The song is
Well, we're going to tell what it is.
right. So
I wanted to know, well, which it's about dying. It's all about dying. It's beautiful. But who was it about? So
right.
he did his research.
Right. So there's a fictitious explanation for the song, and then there's an actual, in reality, if you will, of the song. But fictitiously speaking, the song is actually supposed to be an elvish hymn for people who have passed on. And if you're not familiar with Lord of the Rings, it is a fantasy epic. So I'll be making references to elves and dwarves and dragons throughout the sermon, which might be a little unusual. But it is a elvish hymn to people who have passed on. But the director actually, thought of the song and the content of the song because he had another friend of his who was a director who was diagnosed with cancer as they were finishing the third film. And so he was inspired by his friends struggling with cancer to have the song, the lyrics created and the song composed. So just wanted to get that.
And actually in the movie, it's just in the closing credits that it is. It's not like in the movie somewhere. So a lot of people come and said, well, when was it? So it's the credits. Oh, well, they walked out of the theater by then. So I think a lot of people have missed maybe the best piece of music.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to jump right into the sermon this morning. The spiritual message is renewed shall be blade that was broken. And that is a line from the story. In the story of the Lord of the Rings, there is a sword that was used by the kings of old in battle against evil forces. And it was particularly important because elves and men were together to fight against this darkness. But when their alliance was broken, this sword was also broken. And so in the story later on, centuries later, the sword is eventually forged anew. And one thing that really strikes me as important when reading The Lord of the Rings is people read it. I mean, it's one of the most popular fantasy novels, I think, of all time. People read the books, they watch the movies, and people just really enjoy it. And I was first introduced to Tolkien when I was about 8 or 9 years old. My parents, both huge readers, and my mom first introduced me to C.S. Lewis, The Chronicles of Narnia. And I don't have to explain The Chronicles of Narnia because Lewis basically, hits us over the head with the allegories, right? Like, who is the lion? Jesus, right? There's no mystery about the symbolism at all. And that's not to take away from Lewis's magnificent stories by any means, but he wasn't subtle with his symbolism. But when I was introduced to Tolkien by my father, who probably was just trying to one-up my mom to some extent, oh, she told you about Tolkien? Well, here's Lord of the Rings. It's better, right? I read it about 9 or 10 years old, and it really stuck with me. And every year, and I couldn't tell you why, but from 10 years old to about starting college, I read The Lord of the Rings once every year. And it just did something for me. I would finish the whole trilogy, and I would feel like a reset button had been done for me, and I couldn't really explain it. And about a month ago, I read a book. I stumbled across it while I was at my work. And as some of you know, I'm a page in a library, so I spend my whole day shelving books. And I'm a book addict, so you can imagine why this is sometimes a dangerous thing. And I was shelving books, and I came across this book called The Gospel According to Tolkien. And I just went, what? Pulled it off the shelf and started reading it. And this author had mined for letters of Tolkien, journals of Tolkien, all these correspondences that he had with people explaining what was the deal with some of the events in Lord of the Rings. And he says to a friend of his, well, yeah, I unconsciously at first put in a bunch of spirituality and religious elements into Lord of the Rings. And I consciously went back when I became conscious of this and did some revisions. And I read that and I was really stunned by it because I hadn't really considered, is there any spirituality in the Lord of the Rings? And so after I read this book, I started to reread the trilogy. And I haven't read the trilogy in many years. And so as I was reading it, things stuck out to me. So I started reading The Fellowship of the Ring. This is the first part of the trilogy. And what I discovered is that Tolkien was engaging in subtle spirituality. There are parallels between the Gospels, between other mythology, and the Lord of the Rings. And he doesn't spell it out. Like he doesn't say, okay, here's Christ's betrayal in the Garden of Gethsemane, right? It's not like that. Whereas Lewis probably would have been like, here it is, right? And indeed he does. But you read it and there are these subtle hints of something deeper happening. And one thing that this author who wrote this book, The Gospel According to Tolkien, said, he was inspired to teach a class about philosophy and religion in Tolkien because he would have students who would come up to him when he was just teaching a lit course on the subject, who would come up and say, you know, out of all the books that I've read, I read Lord of the Rings, and I just feel refreshed after I read it. I can't really explain it. And when I read that in this book, I went, I can relate to that. I felt the same way. And this author was prompted to dig deeper, and he found these parallels. Some of these parallels I'll be sharing today with all of you. There's a lot. There's 3 books in this trilogy. It packs a lot. The movies are like 3 hours long, okay? And so as you can imagine, there's a lot of content. And I would be standing up here all day. You'd all be fast asleep by the time I was done explaining all the possible parallels. So I've narrowed it down to something that I think is very important for our community here, and that's fellowship. The concept of the creation of fellowship, what happens when fellowship is broken, and can it be repaired? And this is a theme that runs through the entire trilogy, is the concept of fellowship, and can it be sustained against all odds? And what I'd like to start with now is the first reading. So if I can have a volunteer for the first one, for the John chapter 13 reading. Yes, Mom, go ahead.
Okay, John 13, 34 through 35. A new command I give you, love one another, as I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. And from Tolkien, the quest stands upon the edge of the night, stray but a little, nor fail to the ruin of all, yet hope remains will accompany this tribute.
So one thing that is a major theme, I would say, in the Bible, and also in the Lord of the Rings, is that fellowship is a community, is one of the most important elements of our lives and our spiritual development. In other words, we can't do things on our own. We can understand ourselves as individuals, but after we gain self-knowledge, the question is, well, where's my community? Where's my support system? Support systems are very important for all of us. And the support system can be one other person, maybe 2, 3. In the case of Jesus, it was 12. He hung around with 12 dudes from different walks of life who supported him. Jesus didn't just show up and say, it's all about me, I don't need any support from anyone. In his humanness, he sought out friendship. And he selected 12 individuals, not kings, not royalty, but the common man. But they represented different occupations. Some of them were fishermen, some of them were laborers. Jesus himself was a carpenter. Some were tax collectors. Back then, tax collectors was kind of like how we do the IRS. Really, you're gonna audit me, really, you know? And so these were people that people didn't want to hang around with. He hung out with people from all walks of life. He didn't discriminate. But he found this community, his community, to be the most supportive. Israel isn't just Moses. It's the nation of Israel. It's an entire community, entire nation, struggling and going through ups and downs in their spiritual development. So in the Lord of the Rings, when it's decided that, hey, there's this thing called the ring, that the villain in the story, the Dark Lord Sauron, he has this ring, and it represents all evil and malice. But it's something that people fantasize about. When they get it, they feel like, oh, I can use this. This gives me power. This is a chance for me to stand out and accomplish great deeds and tasks. And when it's decided that this ring really should be destroyed, because to keep it around would probably not be a good idea. They don't just, this council is called, this community is called by this elven lord named Elrond, And it's decided that the ring should be destroyed, but they don't just select one person. They don't go, okay, it's gonna be you, right? It's not on the shoulders of one man, but they decide to form a fellowship. 9 individuals that represent all the different communities in this fantasy land in Middle-earth. There's a dwarf, there's an elf, there's some hobbits, there's some men, and together they are going to go out on this quest. But it's not an easy task. They have many hardships to go through. And this quote from Tolkien is when they meet another elven maiden named Galadriel, who says, look, the quest stands on the edge of a knife. If you stray but a little, it will fail. But hope remains when company is true to each other. Can I have someone read the second reading? Mark.
Mark 14:43 through 52. Just as he was speaking, Judas, one of the 12, appeared. With him was a crowd armed with swords and clubs sent from the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard. Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, Rabbi, and kissed him. The men seized Jesus and arrested him. Then one of those standing near drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Am I leading a rebellion, said Jesus, that you have come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I was with you, teaching in the temple courts, and you did not arrest me. That the scriptures must be fulfilled. And everyone deserted him and fled. A young man wearing nothing but a linen garment was following Jesus. When they seized him, he fled naked, leaving his garment behind. And told him, Come, my friend, said Dorian in a soft voice. Why not get rid of it? Why not be free of your doubts and fear? You can lay the blame on me, if you will. You can say that I was too strong to get by force, or I am too strong for you now.
So the context of the Tolkien quote is, it was at this point that I realized how subtle Tolkien really has the symbolism working in his narrative. At this point, the Fellowship has traveled for quite some time. They've lost one key member of their company, the wizard Gandalf, and they're grieving. And they have to make this decision whether they're going to go to a safer route where they'll have much support, or if they're just going to go straight to the evil land where the ring must be destroyed. And they've been debating it, they've been putting it off until finally they must decide which way we're going to go. And it's left to Frodo, who's the main character, who's the hobbit, who's the ring bearer. And they leave it up to him to decide, well, which way are we going to go? And Frodo, at this point, overwhelmed and grieving, says, I must be alone. And he goes off into the forest by himself to contemplate what the next step is going to be. And while he's alone, contemplating, he's approached by Boromir, who up to this point he's a man, he's a warrior. He's the one guy who just doesn't seem to get it. He's the one part of the company who he's heard all these wise individuals say the ring must be destroyed, and Boromir keeps kind of regressing back and saying, yeah, but you know, does it really need to be destroyed? Couldn't we just kind of take it and use it against the enemy? And there's this whole thing in Tolkien about, unfortunately, the weakness of man at times, the corruption of man. And this is a major theme, the difference between doing something together in a selfless act as a community versus doing something for selfishness. And it's one thing that Tolkien really drives home. He doesn't think that people will just wake up one day and they're corrupt and that they're evil. Actually, evil is simply selfishness. Usually, it's selfishness when you think that your actions are going to lead to a positive result. So I'm very convinced, as one really extreme example, that when the scientists decided to split the atom, they weren't thinking, great, we can now drop a bomb on another country. But what happens is that we sometimes have our own motives. We think, oh, I can do this And it will lead to these positive results, and I'll end up on top, and I will be this very, I'll be the star, I'll have all this power. And then we realize, look around, and we've forgotten the rest of the community. We've forgotten our fellowship. And these are how fellowships are broken. So Boromir throughout the whole time says, well, we could use this ring for good, and then not only will we defeat the Dark Lord, but then I'll be this really cool guy. I'll be the new king. I'll be, oh wait, hold on, and forgetting that there's all these other people around him. So he approaches Frodo when he's alone. He tries to convince him to give him the ring. In effect, he betrays him. And the servants of the Dark Lord arrive, and the fellowship is broken, and they all flee in different directions. So when I was reading this, I thought, oh, this is interesting. It's very, very similar to the Mark reading that we have here. Boromir is essentially Judas, and with the breaking of the fellowship, they flee in different directions. We have to work to bring their fellowship together again. Spoiler alert, they do eventually come back together, but they have much hardship after the fellowship is broken. And there might be times where even our community here at Hillside or wherever, any community that you belong to, whether it's your job, in a relationship, with a loved one, significant other, where things might be going really well, and you hit this period where you're faced with hardship, and you may feel like things are falling apart. But as Galadriel says, hope remains when the company is true. So there is a chance for people to come together. Things can be reforged, but it takes more than one individual. It takes selfless acts of courage to do so. And finally, can I have someone read it? It's on the back, the Swedenborg quote. Helen, thank you.
Heaven and hell, 51. Each community is a heaven in smaller form, and each angel a heaven in smallest form. The reason each community is a heaven in smaller form and each angel a heaven in smallest form is that the activity of love and faith is what makes heaven. This good activity is in every community of heaven and in every angel of the community. It does not matter that this activity is different and distinctive everywhere. It is still the activity of heaven. The only difference is that heaven has one activity here and another there. So whenever anyone is raised into any community of heaven, they say that he or she has arrived in heaven. They say of those who are there that they are in heaven, each in his or her own. All the people who have arrived in the other life realize this. So individuals who are standing outside or below heaven and looking off into the distance where there is a gathering of angels say that heaven is there and over there as well. Tolkien. Well, here at last, dear friends, on the shores of the sea comes the end of our fellowship on Middle Earth. Go in peace. I will not say do not weep, for not all tears are an evil.
So Swedenborg, when he's talking about heaven, he doesn't just talk about heaven as individuals by themselves, but that they gravitate towards communities. They gravitate towards fellowships. We are told that heaven is within us, that we are angels clothed in flesh, ready to be sent to heaven on our own quest. And indeed, we are individuals, but we make up these collective communities, these places of fellowship together. So I think that even metaphysically speaking, in the next life, we still gravitate towards fellowship. And Tolkien says here, this is at the end of the third book, that the fellowship is over in Middle-earth, but they're heading west. They're heading into the west over the sea to this undying land. Some of them together at that time, others are being left behind, but they will later join them. So it is a sorrow that they are departing, but their fellowship isn't really broken at this point. It's been restored. It's stronger than ever. All the members have gone through such a transformative experience. And they are saying that some of us are leaving to go. Some of you can't come with us yet. So do not weep. But if you do weep, not all tears are evil. But eventually we will all be together again in the undying land. So, like I said, the title of the sermon, renewed shall be blade that is broken. There are times when communities might be shattered, where friendships might rupture, relationships may fall. But if we strive together as individuals in a community, things can be restored, things can be repaired, and our quest can continue. Amen. Beautiful. So I'm going to stop the broadcast now. Before I do, though, I was told, and it looks like, funny enough, we have one viewer who's actually watching it live, and it might be my aunt in South Dakota. My mom told me that she might be watching, so if it is, love you. Thank you for watching.